as a developer, when we get these kind of errors, the first thing we want to do is, okay, what is going on over here? Text of undefined, all right? So I'm already using text over here. It says line number 33. So I come to line number 33, it says text over here. So it's saying, oh, it cannot find the property text of undefined. So it's saying this thing is undefined. That's what it's saying over here. Cannot read property text of undefined. So the property text, which I'm trying to access, is cannot be accessed because this thing is undefined. That's what it's saying. So that doesn't make sense. So what I'm going to do over here is I'm going to comment this out, and this is a troubleshooting technique which I do all the time. So I do console.log and I say, okay, the problem is here, right? That's what the error says. So I'm going to print it out and see what's going on over here. What's the thing? We already got the right value when we were creating these curing these selectors over here. What's the problem here? I don't know. So let's save, refresh, and let's say if I hover over here, I keep on hovering and it shows undefined. That the error was right. This thing is undefined. What's going on over here? Why is this undefined? So I say, okay, I already know helpful text is this entire object, and when it goes to get the index 0, 1, and 2, and 3, 1 and 2, it should get these values. What's going on? So I'm going to do one more thing. I'm going to actually put console.log I over here. So I'm going to say console.log I, and I say, what is the value of I over here? So I'm going to save and now refresh, and now if I hover over contact, it showed the index value was 3. What? The index value over here should be 2. This is 0, 1, 2. So if I go over home, that should be index 0. It's showing 3. What's going on over here? There's something wrong. And that brings me to the first breakthrough that I want to tell you about when you are actually running a callback function. So you see over here that when this entire loop runs, it goes through the value I is equal to 0 and runs through the first iteration as long as this I is less than 3. And when it goes through the first iteration, it creates this event listener perfectly. It does that. That's why when I hover, something is logging, the event listener is registered. Then the first cycle runs, and then it says, okay, I'm going to do I++. So I becomes 1. It says, okay, is I still less than the length, which is 3? So is 1 less than 3? True. So it does the job again. And this does I++, so this becomes 2. Is 2 less than 3? That's true, so it does the job again. And then it makes this I++, which is 3. So I at the latest iteration is 3. It goes over here and says, okay, is 3 less than 3? False. So it exits this loop. Now, this is the breakthrough idea. When the for loop ends, the latest value of I is what? It's actually 3 because that was the latest value. So when this entire loop ran, okay, the application is running. Now the user comes in over here and says, okay, I'm now going to hover over. When that event triggers, this particular callback function, where is it? Runs. When this callback function runs, it says, okay, I'm going to come over here and console.log whatever the value of I is. So it sees, what is the value of I right now in my scope, in my lexical scope? Oh, I is actually 3 right now. So it prints out 3. So that's why whenever we are hovering over, it's printing out 3. And whenever we're trying to set the text of this particular helpful text I, there's no index 3 over here. It's 0, 1, 2. There's no fourth item with the index of 3. So that's why our feature is breaking, and that's why it's getting undefined over here. So that brings me to the solution, and the solution is inside closure. And we already know the specialty about closure is that closure is an inner function which has a value. It gets a value from its lexical scope, but it kind of contains that particular value. So in this case, instead of running this particular function, which gets the value I from its lexical scope correct? It does. We're going to kind of confine that I value in a particular way with closure. So here's what I'm going to do. Instead of running it like such, I'm going to actually just copy this out. I'm going to create a new function. I'm going to call it const help text maker. That's going to be a function. Oops. And it doesn't matter what kind of function it is, arrow function, function expression, or function declaration. The closure it doesn't matter to a closure. It's the same thing. And this function is going to simply return this inner function. Okay? And this help text maker function receives a parameter called I. I'm just going to call it I. It doesn't matter. I'm going to call it J, just so you understand, just for a different word. And I'm going to call it J over here as well, and J over here as well. So the job of this inner function is to do the same thing, but it's receiving the value J, sorry, it should be J, from its lexical environment, which is the help text maker. All right? Now, see what I do over here. So now I'm going to actually take this, and when this event is getting attached, so you see the attachment happens every time the loop runs. So the attachment is the first process, but when I hover over, then that particular function runs. So over here, when I'm attaching that event handler, I'm actually going to execute this function. You see, I'm executing it. That's why I'm writing the invocation sign over here. So I'm going to invoke this function, pass in the parameter of I, and I in the first iteration is what? 0. So it's going to run this function. This function will spit out this function, and this function will have a predefined value of I, which is 0. So it's the same thing as if I'm writing like such. I'm going to just put it like such, and this is going to be 0, and this is going to be 0. It's the same thing as if I'm writing that, hard coding that. All right? And I'm going to just revert back. And then the second time it runs, the I is 1. So it's going to actually run this function. This function is going to return this function, which has a predefined value of 1. And the third time it runs, it's going to have a predefined value of 2. So that's going to fix the problem. So now if I save, and now if I refresh, now if I hover over this, you see the correct index shows up. If I go over this, you see the correct index shows up again. If I go over here, the correct index shows up. You see the magic of a closure. It contains the value from its lexical scope. So just by creating a function and returning a function from it, and the logic is the same. I did not change the logic. I literally copied the function and put it inside an outer function and made sure the value was received from its outer function than anything else. And that solved the problem. So I'm going to stop this video over here, and in the next video it's going to be a breeze, and we're going to build our feature, and our hover feature is going to be complete. This is a very common interview question. Most interviews talk about closures. They may give you an example of code and ask you what the result is going to be. And just the way you learned in this video that the result was unexpected. So if you understand the concept of closures and how events work and how asynchronous nature of JavaScript works, you're going to be able to answer those questions with this understanding. It doesn't get more complicated than that. You just need to understand the constructs. So now you do with this example, and I'm going to build on this example and finish our feature in the next lesson. Talk to you in the next lesson.